Blessings and welcome to today's Law Enforcement Daily Devotional. Today we're in the book of James. James is one of my favorite books, and it is my wife's absolute favorite book of the Bible. And reading this and reflecting and remembering things of James in the past, it reminds me that part of the reason I like James so much is because it truly is a book of teaching. It is a book that you could read every single day and pick something out that you're doing wrong and alter your behavior to make you a better Christian and make you get more in line with God and I think what His desire for our lives to look like. It brings us more into the spirit and less into the flesh. It pulls us away from the flesh and into the spirit and the way that we are supposed to live. There's so much instruction in James that we could literally spend a month in this book going just verse by verse. But unfortunately, in the daily read, we have one day. So it is really incumbent upon you to go back, if you haven't read James already, and just slowly read it, soak it up like a sponge. That way, when you're squeezed, the things that come out of your sponge are the things that you put into it, like James. And I've got several pages of notes that you can have if you email me. Otherwise, let's get into it. I'm going to hop around quite a bit, or at least that's the plan. James 1:1 starts out like Paul's letter to the Philippians. He says, I'm a bondservant of Christ. James, and if I'm remembering this right, James was a half-brother of Jesus. He was literally one of Jesus's brothers and spent time with him. And the interesting thing about that is while Jesus was alive and was with them, they didn't buy into what Jesus was. They didn't buy into who he said he was. They didn't, you know how brothers and sisters are. We're critical of each other. And if one of them, if my brother is doing better than me, instead of me going, man, that's very good, it's a competitive type thing, and I get jealous of him, which anytime you get jealous of somebody, it clouds your view and you're not able to see any good that they do. You just focus on your anger. And I think that's what the family did. But once Jesus was gone, something happened, and James recognized Christ was exactly who he said he was. And he could look at the evidence. He could talk to other people like Peter and the apostles that were there, John, and he could really, now this is not James, the brother of John. This is James, the brother of Jesus. James, the brother of John, has already been killed by Herod. We read about that. This is James, the brother of Jesus. Verses 2-4 says, consider it all joy, my brothers and sisters, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. And let endurance have its perfect result, so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. That right there is a bumper sticker verse. I mean, it's a life verse that you could use that for anything that comes up in your life, any hardships, any pain, any struggles, trials, temptations. Consider it all joy when you encounter various trials. Consider it joy. Be happy. And James will go on further and discuss this when we're talking about our words. And don't get angry and upset because something bad happened to you, because in your anger, you do not glorify God. And we'll get to that verse. Verse 120, it says, for a man's anger does not bring about the righteousness of God. It's I would say almost impossible, if not incredibly difficult, for us to have righteous anger. And we like to claim our anger sometimes righteous anger. And righteous anger was when Jesus was in the temple and they had made his father's house a den of robbers, and Jesus overturned the tables. That was righteous anger. He was angry and jealous for the glory of his father, because they were stealing that glory and selling things and robbing people monetarily. That's righteous anger. When we get angry about something that happens to us, that's not righteous anger. We're supposed to be forgiving, remember? So awesome opening statement. Then in verse 5, but if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives to all generously and without reproach, and it will be given unto him. Um, I wish I had a tally mark. I'm talking from the time I was in high school, the times that I've prayed for wisdom. Um, I have had instances in my life where it wasn't wisdom from me, but I felt like God gave me a word and a wise understanding of a situation, and I was able to act correctly in it. It was the wisdom that I had prayed for. It didn't come from myself or something that I learned from the world, the wisdom from the Lord. Um, James is a book, and if I mentioned this already, I'm sorry, but this just came back to mind. James is a book that, like I said earlier about the instruction, James steps on my toes quite often. In the short 5 chapters he has, he constantly steps on my toes. In other words, he'll say something that I immediately recognize in myself. I see a behavior that I'm doing, and James says, "Don't do that." And I'm like, "Oh, who do you think you are calling me out on that?" Well, it's a good thing, and I think that's why I love it so much, and that's why my wife loves this book so much. James will step on your toes. He'll call you out. He'll drop a dime on you, and he is basically, this is a book of warning. Don't act like this. Don't have this attitude. Don't do these things. These are wrong. And I love that. I need a book that, man, right in my face tells me, "Chuck, this is wrong. Don't do it." Don't tell me, "Oh, you're doing good. Everything's okay. You'll get past this." I want to know. I need to know, and I need someone to actually tell me. I don't get a lot of, I don't take hints and clues. I need someone just to tell me like it is. Chapter 1, verse 9, be humble and be glad about your humble position. Be humble in whatever position if you're a chief, be humble and be thankful that you're a chief. If you're a sergeant, be humble and thankful that you're a sergeant. If you're an officer or a rookie, be humble and thankful that you're an officer. Take the position you're in and be satisfied. Doesn't mean that God could open a door and say, "Hey, promote." Go ahead and promote. When you promote, be glad that you're in that position and be humble. Don't lord it over the people around you. See, here we are 7.5 minutes into this, and I haven't even gotten through chapter 1, and there's a ton of incredible chapters. I'm going to read 112 real quick. One of these verses where James steps on my toes, he tells us to persevere under trials. In other words, when something bad happens to me and I get angry or upset, just like that verse, no anger brings about the righteousness of God. I have a bad habit of complaining and whining about my circumstance. "Oh, why'd that happen to me?" That does not glorify God. And James tells me this right to my face. Quit doing that. Be joyful, be humble, work through it. Persevere is the word he uses. Do what God's called you to do. That's wisdom. Man, I gotta close this thing out, but 2, 3, 4, 5. It's an incredible book. So I hope you're able to read it. Lots of law enforcement takeaways in it. Anyway, in the meantime, you guys be safe. Tomorrow we're going to be in Acts 16, 17, and chapter 18, verses 1 through 11. So I'll see you tomorrow.